Yeah, first of all, Joel, thank you very much for having me at your program. My name is Monsignor Megen. I'm the Apostolic Nuncio to South Sudan, still for a very few hours. Uh, About to leave today, have been serving in this country since 2019. In fact, presented my credentials, that is the official letters of accreditation, as it is called, to the president around this time in 2019. So I have been working here uh, nearly precisely 5 years with great pleasure. And as some of you know, I'm a bit well known in the region, have been here for a number of years, serving in different corners.
Well, and how has your mission been looked like for the past years that you are working with the local churches?
Mhm. Of course, as many of you know, when I came in 2019, there was already here a chargé d'affaires, Monsieur Megen, who had just been appointed more or less a year before in 2018. Monsieur Kadima was already in close contact with me because at that point I was stationed in Khartoum, but had many contacts also because of historical reasons, many contacts already with Juba, with people here. So I was able to help him in a number of issues to get him on track. And so when I came into 2019, the situation was not new to me. I had been here a number of times already before, also as a nuncio to Khartoum, because don't forget, the Bishops' Conference is one for the two countries.
Yeah.
So, though as a diplomat accredited to Khartoum, to the then Republic of Sudan, I didn't have any jurisdiction, no authority at the legal point of view, with the civil legal point of view in South Sudan. But as a nuncio of the church, I did have an authority within the church, also of South Sudan, being it one conference. And it is in that role also that already in 2000, if I'm not mistaken, 15 or 16 again, I came to Juba and so was not completely a stranger to this place. And of course, many of the priests, especially, and some of the lay people I knew from a long time ago, like from 30 years ago, more or less, as I had been a young diplomat in Khartoum also, and I was also teaching there at the seminary. So quite a number of priests, they had to suffer under my teachings at that point. So all that helped me, I would say, to enter quite quickly into the reality of South Sudan, which is a complicated one, make no mistake. South Sudan, in many ways, is probably one of the most challenging countries in the world at the moment. Also because it is a very young nation. I think even up to now, you're still the youngest country of the world. You were established in 2011. That is like 13 years ago. And it is still the country and also the government is still in this process of building up, of constructing the nation with many challenges. And of course, now lately, the war also in the north is not very helpful in that. It's another challenge which came on top of it. When I came into this country, there were very few bishops. In fact, there were quite a number of vacancies. And even those dioceses that were not vacant, like Juba and Ye, there were two bishops who basically were already beyond retirement age, but had remained in service to the church on the request of the Holy See, on the request of the Holy Father. The only real bishop in the sense of having full authority was and is the Bishop of Tombura Yambio, at that point, Bishop Hibaro. So there was a lot of work to do. Monsignor Marcadima, a hard worker, helped a lot, was very instrumental in appointing those new bishops and identifying them. Also, that again, not always easy because, you know, at the end, you do not have so many priests in the country, even though people might not know, because South Sudan is a big country, and considering the number of Catholics, you have a relatively low number of priests. So therefore, also finding the right candidates among those few priests is not always easy. In fact, it was a bit of a challenge. But with God's grace, we were able to receive, to achieve a lot. And so, in that sense, maybe also 2024, August, maybe it's also a good time to leave and to hand the helm of the ship of Christ, over to my successor, who should come in at the end of this month.
Right. You have been the lead coordinator when the Holy Father came to South Sudan last year, and he left behind a key instrumental messages. What do you expect happening now from the leaders as a fruit of the Pope visit?
You know, when finally it was decided by the Holy See that this visit would take place, there was a hope and also motivation, by the way, by the Holy See, that this visit of the Holy Father would contribute to a, how shall I put it, to a further development of the government of South Sudan, more commitment from the side of politicians. So this visit took place already a year and a half ago. There are some very, still very fragile fruits from that visit. But what I think what the Holy Father and the Church in general would like to see from the politicians is more commitment to the nation, more awareness that as a government you are at the service of the people. In a democratic state, it works like that, different from, for example, a monarchy or whatever. In a democratic state, the power rests with the people. And the people, they go for elections, then they vote for representatives. So in a sense, they delegate the power which is in them to the representative in order that the representative will be able to represent them in the government and take care and stand for their interests. That idea of a government which is there from the people, for the people, as it would be said in the United States, that awareness still has to develop very much. Many times, that is not only true, by the way, for South Sudan, that is true for many countries. There is a bit the impression that a politician is basically there for himself and for his own group, and not so much for the nation as a whole. And I think that was one of the key indications from the side of the Holy Father, a government which would be there for the entire nation at the service of each and every citizen of South Sudan, based on justice and transparency and accountability.
And do you see that reality of improving life of the citizen of South Sudan from the perspective of leaders?
Of course, unfortunately, what happened, and that is something which, in a sense, was beyond the control also of our leaders, is that because of the war in the north, many things happened, especially concerning the oil, things that had not been foreseen, and which leaves, in a sense, the country empty-handed. What is it, 85–90% of the income of this country comes from oil. Now, for the greater part, those resources have dried up because of the war in the north. Puts, of course, the government in a very, very difficult position, because at the moment there is hardly any money available for the development of the country. All the same, I do feel also that with the little money that is left behind, once again, one would have to look at a more fair distribution of wealth, and come to a better development also of the different institutions, so to say, that contribute to the social development in the country. And I think very much, being myself a bit of a teacher, I think, for example, very much on educational institutes. Many ways, the whole field of education, for the greater part, is left to the churches. The state, as such, invests very little in education, while education is the future of any country, therefore also of South Sudan. If you have educated people, then those students, those kids, that youth, once grown up, can take their responsibility in society. However, as long as we do not invest sufficiently in education, we do not invest enough in the future, and the future can never develop as much as we would wish for.
Well, yes, as you will be leaving this country, the Catholic Church and the bishops will remember much of your work and your contribution, including the recent developments that the Holy Father created a new diocese in South Sudan, which I talked to you in my previous interview. Um, what could be your advice to ensure that the church grow in this country, mainly the Catholic Church?
In a sense, I would give to the church leaders of this country, be they the bishops, be they priests, be they religious, the same advice as I mentioned just now a bit in terms of civilian politicians. It's about, we are here for the people. We are not here for ourselves. We are here in service of, well, of the poor. And poor, we have many in this country. So it is about, not so much about my desires, my own career, what I would like, but it is what the people of God are in need of. And that is something we all need to work on each and every day, including myself. Each and every day, again, you have to ask yourself, how can I be of better service to the people? And it is, in fact, in that service that at the end of the day, you will find also greater happiness and joy. The more you focus on yourself, strangely enough, because people always think it's the other way around, but the more you focus on yourself, the less happier you will be. It is, in fact, in giving, as Christ himself says, that we find joy. And that is not only a pious wish, but it is very much a psychological reality. So that is something which I really would like our bishops, priests, and all the representatives of our churches try to encourage to do, to be of service to the church, to be of service to the people of God. Also, on top of that, by the way, this kind of service which we are called to give is, of course, tiring. I mean, it's work.
Yes.
You have to work hard. By the way, that is sometimes also lacking. People do not work enough at times. You know? But also there, once again, as a religious, as a priest, as a bishop, you can only do that at the moment that you are also very much aware for whom are you doing this. So for the people, but the people who are all children of God. So therefore, the priest, the bishop, needs to have a very living relationship with Christ himself. How do you come to that relationship? By prayer. So that is another aspect. So it is about activity. It is about being of service too. But in order that that service really has the desired quality, I need to be a man also of prayer, of reflection, of contemplation, of the sacraments, in order that the grace of God really enters into me, and in order that I really can make the right decisions in favor of the kingdom of God, in favor of the people of God.
Well, yes, you know, in our country, most people here are youth, and the Christian faith is relying on the young people. Considering the current environment and the situation that is facing young people, given the economic situation and in improper environments, education growth, insecurity, what do you think child leaders could also do to encourage young people do not lose their future?
First of all, as I mentioned before, I think what church leaders need to do, especially in terms of young people, and as you said, the large majority in this country is young, even under 20 years old, is about education and formation. Maybe not always in terms of school, sometimes that also, but also in terms of awareness, in terms of making young people aware of their vocation within society and their responsibility within society. Many times what happens is also, again, that's not only true for South Sudan, but it's true for many countries. The youth is influenced by media, by also by Western media, which in many ways is propagating a very egoistic attitude, in which there is very little room for true service and sacrifice for the community, or in this case for the nation as such. So that is something really, I think, also what we as church should work on education, formation, and increasing awareness of that. Even though you might be young, as a young man, as a young woman, as a boy or a girl, you still can contribute something to the society. And then maybe it's not the society at large, it's not about huge politics, but it is there on the ground, within your own family, within your own village, within your own region, where as a youth, you have something to contribute. As you maybe are aware of, I'm also the nuncio in Kenya. In fact, I'm going back there today. And in a sense, I'm happy to go back today because for tomorrow they have announced new protests in the country by the Gen Z, as they are called.
Yes,
You're probably a Gen Z, maybe yourself, I do not know. But I think in itself, that is a good movement. It's about youth who is aware of the situation on the ground, maybe even better than politicians are. And they feel that things need to change, that a politician, as I mentioned before, really needs to be at service of the people, and that also in a country like Kenya, like many other countries, that is not happening enough. So once again, as youth, that it is also coming to think of it of creating that kind of political awareness as a country. Where do we go? Where do we stay? And how can I, as a young man, as a young woman, maybe contribute in correcting a certain direction our leaders are taking?
So you will see the Western media are influencing the youth not to focus much on their current situation.
Yes, of course. Now,
because I see in social media, you may find young people are using social media much, and that seem like maybe they don't focus on. Is that what you mean?
What I want to say with that is, maybe there are two things in that. First of all, social media in itself create a kind of fantasy world. You watch the screen. It is also, up to a certain extent, addictive, by the way. So young people immerse themselves in social media, sometimes for hours in a day. And in that social media, certain values or non-values are propagated, which are many times egoistic. Also sometimes give the impression, especially I would say within the African context, if you look to media that comes from the West, as if life is easy, as if it is easy to make money, as if life is a fairy tale. Life is not. I know many Africans, for example, I'm originally Dutch. I know many Africans that came to my country, the Netherlands, and each and every one has to find out the hard way, by the way, that when you come to the West, well, then suddenly you find out it's not paradise, and that you have to work very hard, and that you have to start from scratch, and that people are not waiting for you, and that it's difficult to find your place. So there's this whole thing of the social media create also a kind of fantasy expectation, which at the end of the day you will not be able to fulfill. On the other hand, and that is also true, social media can also be a positive instrument in creating that kind of awareness of what should a society really stand for? What are the basic values of the society we would like to live in, based on, once again, justice, about accountability, on transparency, on representation, where politicians really stand in favor of their electorate, etc. These are the kinds of positive values where that also youth pick up. You see that now happen, for example, in Kenya.
All right. And as we are close to the end of this interview, you know that we cannot close without seeing the future of South Sudan election. South Sudan is planning to conduct election in December, and it is not yet being decided by the leaders. What could you say to ensure that even if the election is conducted, this peace could be maintained?
Let me first of all say very, 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 very frankly that I find it hard to understand how are you going to organize elections in December while we are now at the beginning of August and basically hardly anything has happened yet. How is that exactly going to work? I find that hard to believe even in a developed country that would be difficult to pull off, so to say. So, and then in a country like South Sudan, with all the geographic challenges, the lack of infrastructure, it will be even more difficult. So that is something where I feel, well, is it really now the right time to do this as it is planned? I understand in December. So that is something really for me personally, there are very many question marks on that one. Because I do not see how that exactly is going to work. And on top of it, there's another problem. We have a country now, South Sudan, let's face it, which is going through an enormous economic crisis. And it will get worse before it gets any better. Is it now really the right time in this kind of profound crisis to organize an election, which, by the way, an election costs a lot of money, to put on a crisis and the instability which accompanies it, which is very normal. When you have an economic crisis in any country, it creates also a kind of political instability. It's very normal. So now you are going to organize elections in that kind of environment. So these are question marks for me. Then on top of that, you might even have to ask yourself, so if you're really going to you still insist on organizing these elections, okay, fair enough, you try. Are they going to are these elections then really going to be fair and transparent? Who is going really to participate in these elections? Who will come to the voting stations? Who is really going to vote there? What about, is that then really representation at that point? So these are all like political questions one would have to ask himself before getting into this initiative.
But that's not you alone which is asking that question. Many are asking the same question from the diplomatic side and also the other civil society. But the question is, how did South Sudan get out from this current bulky government?
From this?
From this current big size of government. So that's why people
well, frankly speaking, now then you come back to what we said at the very beginning. It's about conversion of heart. As a politician, we have to ask ourselves, for whom do we stand? Do we stand for ourselves? Do we stand for our people? Which good do we really want to achieve? The good of the nation or the good of myself and my family? What is it really that I desire in my heart as a politician to do? And that is basically the basic question over and over again. And that is something which we had this, remember, in 2019, we had this retreat in the Vatican with the Holy Father, and President Kiir was there, and the Deputy President Bachar was there, others were there. There was the famous symbolic kissing of the feet. So the Pope, Holy Father, humbled himself in front of them, trying to show that he wants to be a servant to the nation. Now, the Holy Father has done that. How much do you want to be a servant to the nation? That is the big question. So, as Jesus himself said, at the end of time, in the last judgment, that is what Christ will ask you. What did you do for the least of my brothers? And that is a question that each and every politician has to ask himself.
Well, yes, Your Grace, as you are leaving South Sudan, what are the memories that you are leaving behind now, you are taking with you about Sudan, about South Sudan? Yes.
Of course, memories are plenty. Coming to think of it, I lived 9.5 years of my life in Khartoum. I was another 5 years accredited to South Sudan. So altogether, that means I've been like 14 years in the region. Um, what I, besides, like impressions of nature, I'm from a Nordic country, basically, to understand a bit more the reality of the African nature. That is something very special that always will remain in my mind and in my heart. Also, issues of suffering, of young women with children. I still remember, for example, in Khartoum, when the refugees were coming in from the south, how some of the people at that point came in and they really had lost everything, and young mothers with children. And now, a few months ago, that was last year, we were in Malakal when we received the refugees coming through Rank and coming from Khartoum. It happened again the other way around. The same young women with children, they came to see the suffering and the pain of these people, but at the same time also to see and to understand how strong people really are, the courage of people, the strength of people to continue even while facing the most horrible situations. That life in many ways is always stronger than death, and people want to live and to survive. And also how people, especially the mothers, how they keep on caring for their children, even in the most difficult of circumstances. The mother, and the father, by the way, also, but mothers probably even more, really ready to sacrifice themselves completely for children in a very difficult situation. These are the kind of things that really made me understand more also the value of life. Then another thing, and I say that many times when I go back to Europe, but the average European doesn't understand those kind of things, is that, as you mentioned before, the society in South Sudan is very young.
Yes.
I think you have an average age of 19.8 years or something like that. So, for example, in my country, we are at 43.5 years average age. So that means the majority of people is under 20 years old in South Sudan. Yeah. So also in the how shall I say, in the atmosphere, the vibrancy of the society is different. In a country like South Sudan, even if you walk on the street, there's an enormous energy. And the energy is there because people are young and people are strong and people do and want, and they have a future ahead of them. And that is something also very beautiful each and every time again. And I've said it even to my superiors at times, saying that, yes, okay, they said, but we can appoint you to Europe. I said, well, frankly speaking, I have no interest in Europe because the real life, with all its problems, is in Africa and not in Europe. Because of the youth, because of the positivity. Also, by the way, because very much with all the war, and South Sudan has had plenty of war and conflict and cruelty. At the same time, it's also a land of deep humanity, of respect for each other, and about humanity, about hospitality, those kind of very profound values that many times in the West people have lost in a sense and have replaced it with production, with money, with a very egoistic attitude. So these are the things basically that I have seen and learned in a country like South Sudan, and which I would like to keep with me for the rest of my life.
And when you see South Sudan basketball team played
yes.
in Europe, in the World Olympic Games, so what does that tell you?
It tells me
young nation.
It tells me that the South Sudanese are taller than all the others. So you have an advantage.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do think, that's another thing, and that's also generally true, I think, for the African continent. It's a kind of emancipation of the African continent. You came out of basically colonialism, oppression. You became independent countries generally in the 50s and 60s of the last century. Okay, South Sudan had then a second liberation in a sense in 2011. But you see how many of these African countries now they are coming up and they are revealing to the world their strength and their energy. And I'm profoundly not only convinced of that, I see that happening already, is that Africa is the continent of the future, but the future has started already somewhere at the beginning of 2000. And you see how countries, African countries, are more and more taking their position on the international scene, and that will be increasingly so, while a continent like Europe, even the United States, and so will slowly but surely fall back, and you will rise. That is what I see.
Okay. Thank you
Not
so much.
Not only in basketball.
Not only in basketball, even in football and other activities. Yeah. Thank you so much, Your Grace. Unless if you have a last word that you want to share with my listeners.
Yes, last word. Once again, thank you for all your friendship. I've said that now a few times in my time in these last days. There's this passage in the Gospel of John where Jesus says, I don't call you servants anymore, I call you friends. And I think for me that became very much true. South Sudan is more than a working place, a place where I came to work on behalf of the Holy See, but it is a place where I was received as a friend and where I would meet friends. So that is very important. And as friends, I would like to ask you to pray for me, to continue to think of me as I continue my work. Just for your information, I'm still in Kenya for the time being. Not sure how long that takes. Of course, now that basically South Sudan gets its own ambassador, its own nuncio, is a sign on the wall. So it might be that very soon I also will be transferred from Kenya, which I would expect. So keep on praying for me, keep on thinking of me, as I will always pray for South Sudan, and I will always think of it, and I will always try to follow it, even from afar, as I did already many years ago, by the way, to see where you as a nation will go. And hopefully, with God's blessings, you will achieve great success and blessings. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Shukran, New Zealand Center.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.